Welcome, dear one, or welcome back to Whispers from the Cottage. My name is Marie, and I'm so glad you're here. This space is made for you, for the woman who gives so much, who carries so many lists and hopes and thoughts through her days, and who sometimes forgets how to simply rest. Each story here is a gentle invitation to slow down, to breathe, and to return to that quiet place within yourself that already knows how to soften. Tonight's story is called How the Moon Taught Her to Rest. It's a slow, magical tale about a woman who rediscovers peace through the quiet wisdom of the moon. As the night unfolds, the moon teaches her about cycles, letting go, and the beauty of simply being enough. So, find a comfortable place to settle. Let the lights dim and allow my voice and the gentle sounds of the night to guide you toward rest, reflection, and sleep. You are safe here, you are loved here, and you deserve to rest. The night she forgot to rest, she had not meant to forget. It had happened the way frost arrives in late autumn, quiet and unquestioned. One evening after a day spent keeping up with everything and everyone, she laid her head upon the pillow and found that the pillow had become a slate for lists. Sleep stepped back like a shy animal. The room felt wide and a little hollow. Though the lantern burned low and warm, though the blanket smelled of sun and lavender, she lay still and listened to the cottage. The cottage, like an old friend, answered her with the creak of timber and the hush of woven rugs breathing out stored heat. The hearth, faintly amber, offered its last sigh. Outside, a wind moved through pine boughs with the soft pressure of hands turning pages. Somewhere near the lake, a night bird called once, then thought better of it and folded itself into silence. She turned over, the linen whispered against her skin like a small tide. Sometimes, in her girlhood, she had slept as soon as she closed her eyes. Sleep had come to her then like a faithful companion. No coaxing, no bargains, just a simple fall into a kind and endless meadow. But lately, the path to that meadow had become overgrown. Brambles of expectation blocked the way. The hours kept their stern faces. Even the clock gave a thin, determined tick, as if marching toward something she couldn't name. She had tried everything she knew. Warm milk with a spoon of honey. A book so gentle it was more lullaby than literature. The repetition of breath counts. The careful unclenching of ankles, knees, shoulders. She had set her phone across the room like a distant shore. She had told herself that rest was allowed, that nothing would collapse overnight, that morning would still arrive whether or not she agreed to greet it. Still, sleep did not come. What came instead were thoughts, soft at first, then louder. Did she reply to that message? Did she sound too blunt? When would she plant the new rosemary? How many days had it been since she last called? What was that tiny sound in the plumbing? Was it normal to feel a loneliness that looked like a closed door in the center of the chest? Had she done enough today? And if not, how could she ever do enough tomorrow? Her breath went shallow, not out of panic, just the habit of holding herself together, even in the dark. The moon had climbed without her noticing. It began as a whiteness on the far wall. A quiet pool poured through the window panes. The curtains, thin as old silk, took on a paleness that looked like memory. The light ran along the wooden floorboards, brushed across the edge of the trunk at the foot of the bed, lifted the sleeping profile of the little plant on the windowsill, its leaves like hands folded in prayer. She turned toward it. The glass was cold, in the way glass can be an honest, distant cold that told the temperature of the night without judgment. Beyond the window, the sky was a deep blue, almost black, with just a hint of velvet. The moon hung there as if fastened by a silver pin. She was not fully full tonight. Just beyond the first swelling, the soft, generous curve of a promise gathering itself. It isn't fair, the woman thought, not with bitterness, but with a child's bewilderment. I am so tired, and yet I cannot rest. She did not speak aloud. It felt unnecessary to break the hush. Her thoughts had their own quiet voice, and lately they had grown accustomed to the night. The moon gave no answer, at least not in words. The light moved, barely. If she had blinked, she might have missed it. But she was very awake, and in wakefulness, even subtle things become large. The light shifted as a cloud crossed no more than a ghost smudge, a thread of breath. The moon's edge blurred and returned like a slow pulse. The woman felt, rather than heard, a sentence forming. It was not a sentence she would have written. It did not begin with duty. It did not begin with apology. It did not begin with the word should. It was a sentence, like a shawl being laid across her shoulders by a grandmother she barely remembered. It said, "Be as you are in this hour." It said, "There is nothing to prove to the night." She closed her eyes, opened them again. The ceiling met her gaze with patient beams. The lantern flame, nearly spent, made a petal of orange and then stilled. The moonlight widened like a smile that did not show teeth. She let out a breath she had not known she was holding. A long time passed in which nothing demanded anything. The night grew itself the way loaves rise in quiet kitchens. Outside, the lake offered a soft clink of water against a small pebbled shore. The willow beyond the garden gate combed its hair with wind fingers. The world did not need her to do anything about it. The world would continue turning even if she lay here and listened to it turning. She realized slowly, tenderly, that much of her wakefulness was not the absence of sleep, but the presence of vigilance. She had kept watch for so long for messages, for problems to solve, for proofs of worth that even in darkness her body stood at a doorway as if the morning might slip past without permission. She had become the night sentry, guarding and checking and tallying, summoning small lanterns in her mind so she could count what could not be counted. She pulled the blanket higher. The blanket had been her mother's once, and her mother's mother before that, a weave so dense it felt like a promise. The edges were satin, worn down to a softness that remembered the shape of many hands. She pressed her cheek to it, and the scent of lavender rose up, not the sharpness of new oil, but the gentle, old linen fragrance of sachets tucked into drawers. The moonlight touched that satin edge and turned it into a small river. She watched it flow. The river moved without hurry. It did not ask for arrival. It did not explain itself. It went where the night asked, and when the night asked nothing, it lay still and glimmered. Teach me, she thought, a little surprised at herself for thinking it. If you know something about rest, teach me. Again, no words, but a presence settled in the room the way snow settles when the air decides. It was a presence like cool fingertips on a warm brow. It was a presence like the feeling of stepping into a chapel that has kept candles burning for a century. A hush that has been waiting for you without impatience. All at once she remembered the moon on other nights. She remembered being 12, lying on the back porch with her best friend, counting the satellites and planets and making wishes that did not yet have names. She remembered being 19, walking home alone from the late train, the moon so bright on the cobbles that she could see each uneven line, and how safe she had felt under that soft surveillance. She remembered being 30, stepping out to the garden after receiving difficult news. The moon, a thin, bright comma at the lip of the sky, and how it had seemed to pause the sentence of her life long enough for breath. The moon had always been something living to her, if not a person, then a presence. But tonight, the presence came closer, as if the window were not so much glass as invitation. A thin cloud crossed again. This time, when it drifted, she felt a whisper, as sure as the brush of silk across skin. Not yet, little one, it seemed to say. Not yet full, not yet morning. Come back from the gates of doing. Be small and held. She did not question the voice. Logic might have, but logic was tired, and for once it allowed mystery an unguarded seat. She lay on her back and let her gaze rest on the crown molding where shadow met light. The edge looked like the soft profile of a hill, and she pretended she was lying in grass at midnight, and the curve above her was the slow, steady ridge of the earth itself. She imagined the moon climbing the slope of her breathing, and her breathing welcomed it. In and out, she told herself, the way one speaks to a child learning to float. In and out. No one is asking for anything more complex than this. Her thoughts returned, because thoughts are faithful even when we do not need them. They lined up politely, then jostled, then tried to make their cases. She did not argue, she did not feed them, she returned to the moonlight and treated it as music, something to follow rather than control. When a thought became loud, she imagined it as a sailboat moving across the pale river of light on the floor. She watched it pass. She let it slip through the doorway of the hall and out into the night, its small white sail catching the slightest draught. Another boat, another, each with a name at the stern. Reply, repair, remember, regret. She waved at them as they went. She did not board. Her breath deepened. She could taste the night, a mineral coolness like stones in a creek. From the kitchen drifted the clean scent of washed pottery left to dry. The fig tree in the corner held its breath with her, glossy and still. Somewhere beneath the bed, the old wood remembered forests and hummed an ancient low hum. The hum said, I have been alive for a long time. You do not have to keep watch alone. She smiled into the dark. It surprised her, the ease of it, the way the corners of her mouth understood, and how the small movement softened her whole face. It felt like setting down a bucket you didn't realize you'd been carrying across a field for miles. The moon moved one finger width higher in the sky. In that slow ascent, the room changed. The shadow of the window frame shifted. The light laid itself along the dresser knobs, the handle of the wardrobe, the porcelain of the water pitcher, turning each into a quiet star. On the chair by the door, her shawl gathered silver along its fringe, and the chair itself became a kind of seated guardian, humble and sure. She realized the moon was showing her the difference between full and enough. Fullness, she knew, had become her goal too often. Days brimming, schedules brimming, cupboards brimming. But enoughness, this delicate silver, asked less and gave more. Enoughness was the lamp turned low, not bright. Enoughness was the one good cup of tea, not the frantic second. Enoughness was the yes that arrived like a soft coat across her shoulders, and the no that kept the night kind. Maybe rest is enoughness, she thought. Maybe rest is the art of being exactly the size of the hour I'm in. The moon did not disagree. For a while, she simply gathered the room to herself, the way a seamstress gathers fabric, a slow draw, a soft fold. She felt the edge of her body against the sheets, the weight of her hair on the pillow, the small flutter at the base of her throat that had once been anxiety and now was only a bird settling into its nest. It wasn't sleep yet. It was something earlier, a threshold. She found herself at that threshold and did not hurry across. How many times had she rushed doors, flung them open, marched into rooms as if each were a test. Tonight she stood at the door of rest and placed her hand upon the wood and felt its grain. She let the scent of sap and age come up to meet her, and she said to the threshold without words, "I see you. I will not storm you. I will be let in." The moon in her periphery stretched a thin silver path from window to bed, and the path was straight enough to be trustworthy and soft enough to be taken barefoot. She went barefoot in her mind. The boards were cool. Each creak felt like a greeting rather than a complaint. When she reached the window in her imagination, she did not open it. She simply stood and looked out at the night she already loved but had forgotten how to be part of. The lake was a dark bowl. The pines stood tall and priestly. The path to the garden gate was a pale ribbon. The world breathed in, the world breathed out. Only then did she notice a small glow at the edge of the windowsill. At first she thought it was a trick of the moonlight settling on a bead of resin from the frame, but it persisted, a pearl of radiance the size of her thumbprint. It quivered as if alive. She blinked. It remained. The glow did not speak. It moved. It moved like a seed, freed by wind, lifting and staying in the same instant, an impossibly slow tumble. It crossed the room, not toward her, but along the path of shadow, like a courteous guest, avoiding the center of attention. It hovered above the trunk at the foot of the bed and then settled, leaving behind it a faint thread in the air that dissolved as soon as it formed. She did not sit up. She did not need to. Even the thought of sitting up seemed an interruption, unnecessarily sharp. She let the glow be what it was, which is to say, she let wonder be simple. When it rested on the trunk, the glow widened by a breath, and the old leather looked younger. She could see, as if through time, hands buckling the strap, a train station, with fog crossing its tile floor, the trunk waiting to be hoisted onto a cart. Her grandmother's initials gleamed where they had once gone dull. The glow faded, and the letter returned to itself, still handsome, still tired, still home. She understood then a small thing. The moon had not come tonight to cure her of sleeplessness. The moon had come to teach her the pleasure of presence. Presence was not a cure. Presence was a companion. It would sit with her, even if sleep did not. It would soften the chair, make of the room a sanctuary. It would render the edges rounder, the shadows kindly, the clock's tick less like a metronome and more like a heart. You are not alone," said the hush. Whether from moon or room, she could not tell. "When you cannot rest, you can still be held." She turned onto her side, the side that faced the window. Her hand slid beneath the pillow-cool fabric, then the warmer lining. She curled her knees slightly. An animal radius, a shell, the posture of those who trust that nothing sharp will approach from the darkness. On the far hill of her mind, a figure appeared. It was not a figure one sees in daylight. It was not precise. It was not wreathed in symbolism. It was a woman with silver hair braided into a crown, her face clearer than her dress clearer than her. Hence, the figure did not frighten her. It felt like an idea given a shape. It felt like the moon wearing a body so that some truth could step closer. The figure raised one hand, palm forward in blessing. The light of that palm met the light in the room with no conflict at all. The two lights liked each other. The two lights were the same. "Enough," the figure said, not sternly, not sweetly, simply and forever. The word went out like a ripple. It reached the corners where dust stands together, and the dust loosened. It reached the dresser drawers where folded clothes keep their folded worries, and the worries sighed. It entered the shore of the lake and made of it a softer edge. Enough. She realized the word was not about effort, but about identity. It was not a rating. It did not assign a grade. It did not tidy her. It did not polish her. It gathered her, and because she felt gathered, she felt less vigilant. The boats on the light river had all drifted away now, and in their absence, a swan glided across the floor, a long-necked shadow with no anxiety in it. The swan tilted its head to look at her, then went on, dissolving into the darker corner where the wardrobe stood. The wardrobe, touched, became briefly a chapel door. Then it too returned to wood and brass, faithful and ordinary. She remembered a prayer she had once loved. It was not fancy. It was not even fully words. It was the shape of an appeal with no instruction attached. It said, "Hold me while I forget how to hold myself. Hold me while I learn again." She let the prayer be as quiet as breath. The moon reached a height that clicked into place like a key finding the exact right angle. The room filled not more with light, but with clarity. The edges of things seemed to understand themselves. Her breath lengthened once more, and this time it found the rhythm of waves on a night shore, a rhythm with odd and beautiful variances. 2 shorter breaths, then one long, then a pause, 3 even, then a sigh. She did not fight the sighs. She followed them, and in that following, she felt the small, unmistakable weight of sleep approaching not yet the full body of it, but the pole steps in the hallway. the soft fur brushing the jam. She did not call to it. She did not coax. She opened her inner door and left it ajar. The moon's voice, if voice it could be called, came once more. "Little one," it said, and she did not mind being called so. "Little one, you have worn brightness like armor. You have tried to be full for everyone. Look at me. Even I do not carry my light all the time. I wax and I wane. I am crescent, I am hidden, I am swollen and smooth. I rest in my own sky. I trust the darkness to hold me when I am not seen." Her eyes became wet, not with sorrow, not with joy, but with the relief of being told the truth in a way that did not require her to do anything with it except receive. "Teach me," she thought again. But the thought was now a cradle instead of a to request. Tomorrow, the moon might offer lessons. Tomorrow, the faces might become a way to mark her days, to pace herself with tides, to know when to plant and when to lie fallow. But tonight, the first teaching would be gentler still. Tonight, the lesson would be stop trying. Not because trying is wrong, not because work is unholy, but because night is night, and the word for night is never strive. She pulled the blanket up to her chin and let her jaw slacken. Slackening is a holy word. It undoes what daylight knots. The moon loves slackening. You can tell by the way it flings a silver leash across the lake and then lets it loosen until the leash becomes a ribbon, and the ribbon a line, and the line the idea of a line. She loosened, and the room loosened with her. The shawl on the chair slid a little, finding a more honest drape. The lantern flame finished its work at last and went thin as a hair, then vanished. And she did not mind the dark, because the dark had light inside it now. "You are held," said the dark. "You are held," echoed the boards. "You are held," the clock agreed, softening its tick into a heartbeat. And then, when it saw she was listening, into the memory of a heartbeat, from when she was small and pressed against another chest that kept watch for her, the figure at the edge of her mind stepped backward without leaving. The glow on the trunk remembered itself into moonlight. The swan folded into shadow. The boats reached a harbor she could not see. The word enough hung above the bed like a gentle banner, so sheer it moved when she breathed. She turned her attention to the smallest real thing she could find. She found it at the tip of her nose, the coolness of air going in. She found it at the bridge of her nose, the subtle warmth going out. She found it at the soft hollow between collarbones, the weight of the blanket with its satin border. She found it behind the eyes, the looseness there, as if someone had unhooked two heavy earrings and set them gently into a velvet-lined box. If her thoughts returned, she would gather them as one gathers a handful of fallen petals, admiring their color, noting their softness, and then letting them float into a bowl of water to be beautiful without asking more of them. In the bowl, the petals would spin once, twice, then settle against one another like friends who no longer need to fill the air with speech. The moon, that patient tutor, did not ask her to pass a test before sleep. It asked her to meet the night, as the night is a wide, slow river, accepting the reflection of whatever looks into it. Trees, clouds, stars, faces. It is not the river's job to correct the visitor. It is the river's pleasure to hold and release. She felt held, and in being held, she released. Her jaw softened further. The small muscles beneath her tongue let go. The throat broadened. The belly, which had kept itself tucked as if bracing for a blow that would not come, bloomed outward like a morning glory, soft, simple good. Her hands opened where they had curled, her toes unhooked from invisible rungs. Sleep stepped closer, polite in its approach. It sat on the edge of the bed, the way a friend sits, without demand, without agenda, ready to depart if unneeded, ready to stay if welcomed. Sleep looked like a plain thing, not a jeweled guest. It wore linen and smelled of rain. It carried nothing. Its hands were empty. Empty hands are trustworthy. They can hold you because they aren't already clutching. She did not rush to embrace it. She let the space between them grow friendly. She watched the moon one last time. The moon looked back in the way that moonlight looks back, by touching rather than telling. It touched her forehead, a cool kiss. It touched the line between her eyebrows, smoothing it as if smoothing a page. It touched the place beneath her ribs where worry has built its nest. And worry, startled, looked up and saw that the roof was made of fear, and fear was made of air, and the air was made of nothing that could not be breathed. You are not a lighthouse every night, said the moon. Sometimes you are a quiet cove where ships find fog and decide not to leave until the fog lifts. Sometimes you are the shore that looks empty and is full of shells. Sometimes you are the dunes holding fast against the wind. Sometimes you are the wind. She smiled again, softer than before. Tomorrow, she promised, not to the moon, not to herself, but to the old habit of vigilance that was busy unbuttoning its coat. Tomorrow we can count. Tomorrow we can plan. Tonight we will be the size of the hour. The hour had become sweet and round. It had lost its edges. The night, like a generous seamstress, had let the fabric out, adding a triangle of silver at each side so there would be room to breathe. She took one more deep breath, and the breath returned to her, carrying the scent of the lake and the cool of the glass and the memory of hands from long ago, smoothing hair from her forehead. The breath told her that even when she forgot how to rest, rest remembered how to find her. The moon inched higher, though inched is not quite right. The moon moved the way certainty moves, unhurried, unargued. In that slow movement, the light on the floor drew closer to the bed. A thin blade of silver reached the hem of the blanket, touched it lightly, and withdrew. It was enough. She did not fall asleep yet. That would come. She did not need it to come quickly. She had already crossed the first gate. The watchman within had set down her lantern. She had seated herself on a low stool by the doorway of herself and said to the passing thoughts, "The house is closed for the evening. Come again tomorrow with your baskets and your ledgers. Tonight we host only silence." Silence came in, grateful. Silence took off its shoes. Silence lay down on the rug and watched the ceiling with her. Silence did not make her ears ring. It made her ears drink. It fed her with a sound of nothing loud, nothing sharp, nothing urgent. It fed her with a gentle tick of cooling metal in the stove. It fed her with the far, far off call of an owl who had found what it was looking for and wished to tell no one but the dark. This then was the beginning. Not a cure drawn tight like a corset, but a loosened ribbon. Not a promise of every night easy, but a promise of this night kind. Not an end to all waking, but an end to the loneliness of it. She closed her eyes, not to block the moon, but to take the moon inside, the way one takes a candle inside cupped hands and walks it through the rooms of a beloved house. "Thank you," she thought. The moon did not answer. Perhaps it bowed. Perhaps it simply was itself. Perhaps that is the truest thanks of all we can exchange with the world. To be and to let the other be. Her breath went in and out once more, a tide finding its shore. The boats had reached their harbors. The swan had folded. The figure with the silver hair had sat down behind her like a mother on a porch, quiet and watchful. The word enough hovered, and then, like all good words, melted into the way things felt, rather than demanded to be noticed. She slept a little. She woke a little. She drifted in the way that rivers do when there is no rain moving, but untroubled, shallow but sufficient, every small stone beneath visible and beautiful. She moved her hand once, finding the cool place on the sheet, and then stilled again, and the sheet warmed. The moon kept watch without asking to be thanked. Outside, the willow combed and combed and combed. The lake made small glass sounds. The pine stood and did not need to be bowed to for its standing. The night was And because it was, she could let herself be. She whispered, not with her lips, but with the softest part of herself. Tomorrow can have me then. Tonight, let me be only what I am breathing, loved by a light that does not burn, witnessed by a quiet that does not judge. And the night, pleased, said nothing back. The hour rounded further, like a pebble worn smooth in a pocket by the constant rubbing of gratitude. Her body, hearing at last that it was not on trial, lowered its defenses one by one, the way a castle lowers its drawbridge when the returning rider is recognized as kin. She floated. She forgot to guard her edges. She remembered how to be porous to gentleness and impermeable to noise. She became a field beneath moonrise, each blade of grass holding its own gleam, and the fox in the hedgerow pausing to listen, and the far bell of a sheep, the sound with rain in it, though there was no rain. If there was weeping, it was the kind that waters something rather than floods it. If there was laughter, it was the small laugh of relief. If there were dreams, they were simple. A door that opens, a cup that fills, a spoon that finds honey and leaves behind sweetness for the tongue to discover when it wakes. She slept then, or something very near to it, soft as ash, bright as the inside of an eyelid when light is close. The moon, pleased with beginnings, slid a fraction further along its path and kissed the roof of the cottage in thanks for sheltering. One more soul who had remembered, if only for a night, how not to try so hard at being. Down the road, another window shone and then dimmed. Far away, on another lake, someone else turned over and found a cool place on their sheet, and the same silver poured in. Here, in this small cottage, pressed gently into the hillside, the woman who had forgotten how to rest began to learn. She began by letting the night be night. She began by listening to the light. She began by letting the word enough be more than an idea, by letting it be a room she could live in, with doors that opened onto darkness that was not empty, but full of quiet stars. And while the stars took their old places, and the pines kept their old oaths, and the lake held the moon's thin leash, she slept a while and woke a while, and did not call either failure the lesson had started. In the morning there would be tea, and the hum of daybirds, and the soft scold of the kettle, and a page with a few words written on it in faint pencil, be the size of the hour. But that would come when it came, for now the moon taught in the language of touch, and the first touch was this: a hand of light across her brow, a quiet blessing, and then the quiet again. And in that quiet, the night folded around her like a shawl, and she, small and held, let herself be carried to the edge of sleep and a little beyond. Whispers in silverlight morning arrived gently. like the quiet exhale after a long-held breath. She awoke not from deep sleep, but from a place between dreaming and waking, that tender space where the mind still hums with night's softness. The moon was gone, though its echo lingered on the walls. The air held that special calm that follows rain, even though there had been no rain at all. It was the stillness after a storm that had happened inside her. She moved slowly, feeling the weight of the blanket, the coolness of the floor beneath her bare feet. The kettle on the stove seemed to smile as she filled it. Even the clink of porcelain felt gentle today. Something had shifted small, quiet, but undeniable. The house itself felt lighter. When she stepped outside to gather wood for the morning fire, dew brushed her slippers. The sky, pale as milk, held the soft moon just fading behind the clouds. The ghost of last night's teacher. She stood for a moment, hands resting on the porch post, eyes fixed on that fading circle. "Thank you," she whispered. It wasn't to the sky, not really. It was to something deeper, the presence that had sat with her when she forgot how to rest. Then she smiled, faintly. "I must have dreamed that," she murmured. But dreams, she knew, often carried truths the daylight could not. That day unfolded quietly. She tended her small garden, trimming herbs, brushing soil from her palms. She moved slower than usual, but it didn't feel like laziness. It felt like reverence. The world did not punish her for this pace. The cat from the neighbor's barn came to visit, stepping like a shadow through the mint. The postman waved, left a letter, and didn't seem in a hurry either. The clouds drifted with no destination. Even the wind paused between trees, as if to listen. That night, when the sun finally slipped behind the hill, she made tea and sat by the window again. She didn't plan to look for the moon, but her gaze went there on its own. It was thinner tonight, a shy crescent, tender as a fingernail clipping of light. The air around it was dark velvet, and the stars had begun to gather quiet witnesses. She took a sip, the steam curling like breath, and said softly, "You're early tonight." And in that moment it answered, not with sound would have broken the spell, but with a soft shimmering along the edge of the light. The silvery glow grew warmer, richer, as if the moonlight itself were listening back. "You called me teacher, and so I came." The words did not move through air, they moved through stillness. She felt them in her chest, behind the heart, where breath pauses before it leaves the body. "Am I truly hearing you?" she asked, her voice barely a breath. "You are not hearing," the moon replied. "You are remembering. We have spoken before." The woman smiled, though her eyes glistened. "When I was small, and smaller still, you have always belonged to night." The teacup trembled slightly in her hand. She set it down and leaned on the sill. The garden was a quilt of shadows now. The willow's leaves shimmered in silver threads, and the lake looked like a mirror laid flat between worlds. "What are you teaching me?" she whispered. The light shifted again, brighter, and then softened. It seemed to breathe with her. "To rest is not to stop moving," said the moon. "It is to move within stillness." She frowned slightly, not in confusion, but in concentration. "I don't understand." "You will. Every creature knows the rhythm, but forgets when the noise grows loud." The moon's light thickened on the floorboards again, just like before, a pale river finding its course. The woman felt drawn to sit within it, and when she did, her heartbeat slowed to match its rhythm. Watch the tide of your own breath, and you will see the same pull that moves the oceans. I wax when you gather, I wane when you let go. She closed her eyes. The air was cool on her cheeks. Her breathing deepened. She imagined the tide, in and out, drawing silver ripples through her veins. "Do you ever tire of your own cycles?" she asked softly. "I have never been tired," said the moon, "for I am allowed to disappear." Those words pierced her gently, like light through lace. Disappear. How long had it been since she allowed herself to vanish, to step away from the endless hum of doing, of proving, of being seen? She opened her eyes and let her gaze drift across the fields. Somewhere beyond the trees, a small owl called out a single hollow note that floated like a question mark through the night. "Tell me," she whispered, "how do I learn to rest as you do?" "By trusting the darkness, by letting the unseen do its quiet work." The moon's glow flickered slightly, and for a moment she thought she saw the shape of a woman standing in that light, tall, luminous, her hair woven from clouds. But the image faded as quickly as it came, leaving only radiance and silence. "Do not chase the light," the moon said. "Be the vessel that receives it." She pressed her palms together in her lap, feeling the warmth of her own skin against the cool air. Her shoulders dropped. The knot between them loosened. "I've been holding everything so tightly," she whispered. "Even peace." The moon's voice came like a tide against the shore of her mind. "Then loosen your grip. Peace is not something you keep. It is something that keeps you." A long silence followed, the kind that heals. Somewhere, a fox moved through the underbrush, its paws soft against the earth. The night smelled of damp moss and faint smoke from her chimney. She could hear the tick of the cooling stove, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft sigh of her own breath. Every sound belonged. Nothing needed to be fixed. It was then she noticed something new, a shimmer above her cup. Tiny droplets of steam had caught the moonlight, turning into floating pearls. They rose and drifted toward the window, dissolving as they met the air. "Even you disappear," she said softly. And the moon answered, "Yes, and still I return." Her heart swelled. "Then maybe I can too." "You were never gone," said the moon, "only away from yourself." She rested her forehead against the cool window pane. Outside, the reflection of her face mingled with the stars. For a moment, she could not tell which belonged to her and which to the sky. Hours slipped by unnoticed. She moved to the chair near the hearth, wrapped herself in a shawl, and let the light play across her hands. The flickering from the dying fire mixed with the silver glow until the room became neither night nor day, a twilight between worlds. "This is your beginning," whispered the moon. "Rest is not retreat. It is remembering what you are made of." "And what am I made of?" she asked. "The same dust that shines in me." She laughed softly, not the quick laugh of humor, but the slow, trembling laugh, recognition. The laugh that happens when truth touches something long asleep. Her eyes grew heavy, but she did not fight it. She let the weight come, as natural as dusk. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was the moon resting above the trees. Smaller now, but more certain. And she thought, half dreaming, perhaps the moon grows smaller, only to show me that light can rest too. She woke once in the night, just briefly, to the sound of gentle rain. Or was it wind in the leaves? Either way, it felt like blessing. The air was cool and new, and the moon's glow still lingered on the walls. "Sleep now," said the voice, faint but clear. "Tomorrow I will teach you the rhythm of becoming." And she, too drowsy to answer, only smiled, because she trusted that the night would keep its promise. The rhythm of becoming the next evening came wrapped in silver blue calm all day. The woman had carried the memory of that moonlight within her like a secret. Not heavy, not urgent, just quietly alive beneath her ribs. She moved through her hours with a strange tenderness, as though she were walking beside an invisible friend. Her chores became slower, her breaths longer. Even her tea seemed to steep in a more patient silence. When twilight finally stretched its fingers across the garden, she felt a subtle pull toward the window, the same magnetic invitation that had called her the night before. The moon was waiting, but it was different now. It had grown fuller, its edge more rounded, its light more sure. The woman smiled. "So soon," she whispered. "You change every night, and yet you are always you." "As do you," the moon replied, its voice moving like water over stone. "Change is not the opposite of rest. It is the rhythm within it." She leaned her cheek against the wooden frame, watching the lake beyond the meadow. The reflection of the moon rippled there, whole then broken, then whole again. The moon continued, soft and clear. I live in 4 rhythms. Each one is a doorway, and all must be walked. Would you walk them with me, little one? She nodded. Teach me. The new moon, the quiet beginning. First comes the new moon, said the voice. The sky forgets me then. To the eye, I am gone. Yet, in my hiddenness, I am gathering light. The woman imagined that darkness, the black sky, empty of its pearl. How do you bear being unseen? She asked. Because I trust that absence is not the end of presence, said the moon. When I vanish, I rest in my own shadow. I prepare without performance. The words sank into her. She thought of all the times she had disappeared into silence, into solitude, into a kind of exhaustion that the world could not see. She had always felt ashamed of it, as though invisibility meant failure. But now, hearing the moon's voice, she saw it differently. Maybe those unseen days were not endings, but beginnings in disguise. The way seeds sleep before spring, the way soil must be still before it can nourish. She whispered, so it's all right to vanish sometimes? It is holy to vanish, said the moon. Creation needs the pause. The waxing moon gathering light. The moon brightened, casting a thin beam across her table. The wood glowed like honey. Then comes waxing, said the moon. The world begins to see my return, though I am not yet whole. She nodded slowly. That's when I usually rush, when I feel almost ready and try to be complete too soon. Yes, the moon murmured. Humans hurry their becoming. They mistake growth for performance. But becoming is a tender thing. It does not like to be watched too closely. The woman smiled, touched by the gentleness in that lesson. Outside, a moth brushed against the glass, a small white fluttering thing drawn to the light. It landed, rested, then lifted again. See how it moves, whispered the moon. It follows glow, but it pauses between flights. Even the smallest creature knows to rest between reachings. The woman took that in the pauses, the patience, the art of half-light. She could feel the moon's brightness in her chest, stirring something soft but certain. Let your growth be quiet, said the moon. Let it be unseen for a while. The full moon, the art of enough, night deepened. The fire in her hearth dimmed to amber, and there, rising in full splendor, came the moon round, luminous, unashamed. The light spilled across her lap, across the woven rug, across the very air itself. Everything shimmered with presence. Here I am, the moon said, and I do not apologize for being full. The woman's breath caught. The glow was so beautiful, it made her ache, not from longing, but from recognition. You too are allowed to be full, the moon whispered, to speak your truth without softening its edges, to shine without asking permission. She pressed a hand to her heart. How do I know when I am full? When you no longer reach, the moon replied. Fullness is the moment when you can simply be. The woman closed her eyes. She imagined her own fullness, not a busy kind, not loud or proud, but peaceful. A fullness that needed no witness. A fullness that said, "This is enough. I am enough." Even fullness needs rest, said the moon. When I am brightest, I am already preparing to wane. The waning moon letting go. The light softened, dimmed slightly, shadows lengthened. The moon began to lower in the sky, her edge losing its perfect roundness. Then comes the waning, she said, the time of unburdening. The woman felt her throat tighten. That sounds painful, only if you cling. To wane is not to lose, it is to release what has already served. The words were warm, though they stirred something deep and old in her, a sadness she had carried like an amulet. She thought of the people she had loved and released, the plans that had fallen away, the versions of herself that no longer fit. She thought of how each leaving had felt like breaking, and yet, somehow, life had kept growing through the cracks. To wane, said the moon, is to make space for the next dawn. She bowed her head. Then perhaps I have been waning for a long time. Yes, said the moon kindly. And every time you think you are ending, you are really returning to beginning. The woman breathed out a sound between a sigh and a song. The dark before light, the moon sank lower until only a sliver remained above the trees. Soon I will disappear again, said the voice. Fainter now, like mist. But remember, disappearance is a kind of faith. It means trusting that the light will return. She nodded, tears shining like stars along her lashes. I think I understand now. To rest is to trust the unseen. Yes, said the moon, and to rest is also to trust yourself. The light shimmered once more, then dimmed. Only the outline of the hills remained, bathed in faint blue. The woman rose from her chair, her shawl slipping slightly from her shoulders. Her heart felt wide, her breath slow and even. She walked to the door, stepped outside, and stood barefoot in the dew. Above her, the last of the moon's glow clung to the air like perfume after someone beloved has left the room. The lake was still. The air smelled of damp grass and pine. She tilted her head back and whispered, "Thank you, teacher." In the hush that followed, she felt a single drop of light touch her brow, as though the moon had left a kiss to remember it by. That night, she dreamed. In her dream, she was walking through a forest made of mirrors. Each mirror held a different version of her. The child who slept easily, The woman who ran too fast, the soul who stood beneath a sky of silver and learned to breathe again. One by one, the reflections smiled, not sadly, but knowingly, and dissolved into moonlight. The forest filled with soft laughter, the laughter of wind in willow leaves. And when she awoke, she knew the rhythm of the moon was the rhythm of her own becoming. The waning and the letting go. The nights grew cooler. September's breath had begun to move through the trees, soft and slow, carrying with it the faint scent of change. Each evening, as she closed her shutters, she noticed the light shift gentler now, dimmer, the edges of the moon thinning like lace. She did not feel sadness this time. She had learned what the waning meant. It was not an ending, but an easing. Still, the quiet brought things to the surface, thoughts she had hidden beneath her busyness, voices that had waited their turn. Letting go, she realized, was not a single motion. It was many small softenings, one after another, until the heart finally unclenched. That evening, she lit no lantern. She wanted only the moon's faint glow and the hush of her own breathing. The cottage sighed around her like an old friend settling deeper into its chair. From the open window came the scent of damp earth and rosemary. The wind spoke in gentle threads through the leaves. She sat on the floor by the window, her shawl draped loosely over her shoulders. Her hands rested open in her lap, palms upward, as if finally ready to receive nothing. Outside, the moon hung low and delicate, a slender crescent tilted toward the lake. Its reflection rippled on the water like a piece of silk moving with breath. "You have walked well," came the whisper. "Now comes the softest lesson." She closed her eyes. "Tell me." "To let go is not to lose," said the moon. "It is to unclasp your hands and trust that what remains was always meant to." Her throat tightened, as though those words had found the oldest knot there. She thought of all the things she still held inside her memories that no longer hurt, but still hummed faintly, as if asking to be honored one last time. "I think I'm afraid," she said quietly. "Afraid of what, little one?" "Of emptiness," she admitted. "Of who I'll be when I stop holding everything together." The moon's light pulsed gently, like a slow heartbeat. "You will not be empty," it said. "You will be spacious. There is a difference." The words wrapped around her like silk. "Spacious." She repeated it aloud, tasting the softness of it. To be spacious, not hollow, not gone, but open enough for peace to enter. She looked down at her hands. They were trembling slightly, though not from cold. She turned them over, studied the lines, lifelines, heart lines, the small map of years. I've been trying so long to hold things steady, she whispered. My plans, my past, my promises. I thought if I let go, everything would unravel. And yet, here you are, said the moon, unraveling gently, and nothing has fallen apart. She smiled faintly through her tears. The truth of it shimmered. You are not the threat, the moon continued. You are the weaver. When one pattern ends, your hands will know another. The woman exhaled a long, shivering release. It felt like setting something down that had been invisible but heavy. A cloud drifted across the sky, soft and grey, veiling the moon for a moment. The room dimmed. She didn't panic this time. Instead, she watched how the darkness moved in, gentle and certain. The moon didn't vanish, it rested. And so she let herself rest too. She leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. In the absence of light, she could hear her heartbeat, slow and steady. It sounded like a lullaby from somewhere deep inside her bones. You see, murmured the moon from behind the cloud, the sky does not mourn when I hide. It simply waits. She smiled softly. So I can hide too, sometimes. Of course, rest is not a weakness. It is an agreement with life. The cloud drifted away, and the thin silver returned, tracing the curve of her cheek, the shine of her tears. Now let go, said the voice. Not of everything, just of what no longer wants to stay. She hesitated. How do I know what that is? If it must be gripped, it is already leaving. The simplicity of it broke her open. Her shoulders shook once, twice, and then quieted. She didn't try to stop the tears. They were not sorrowful. They were the sound of doors unlatching inside her. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely there. I don't want to forget, she whispered. You won't, said the moon gently. Letting go does not erase love. It makes room for it to breathe. Her gaze softened toward the lake, where ripples caught the faint light. Each small circle widened and dissolved into stillness. Each one was beautiful, even as it faded. She thought, perhaps I have been a ripple too, never meant to stay still forever. The wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of cedar and distant rain. It brushed a strand of hair across her face, and she didn't tuck it back. Every cycle must fade, the moon said. Even I grow thin before I begin again. But the fading is not my ending, it is my trust in the dark. She closed her eyes again and felt her breath move like water. In, out, the rhythm of surrender. Say it with me, the moon whispered. I am safe in the dark. Her lips moved with the words, I am safe in the dark. I am whole, even when unseen. I am whole, even when unseen. I can rest without vanishing. I can rest without vanishing. Each repetition loosens something further, like silk being unspooled from a tight knot. Outside, the clouds gathered again. The moon faded behind them completely, but this time the absence glowed not empty but tender. The woman stood, stretched slowly, and crossed to her bed. She did not light the lamp. She wanted the dark to stay. She lay down, feeling the linen cool against her skin, and turned her face toward the window. Through the soft veil of cloud, she could still sense the moon's presence like a heartbeat behind the sky. Sleep now, the whisper came. The waning is not the ending. It is the sigh before the next beginning. Her eyes closed. Her breath deepened. And for the first time in years, her dreams felt weightless, as if they, too, had learned to let go. The night she finally slept. The night was soft again, not new, not full, not waning, just night, in its truest form, a quiet skin stretched over the world, holding everything in its cool embrace. The woman woke once, and for a moment she didn't know if she was awake or still dreaming. The air around her had the same quality as a sigh. She felt the hush of the cottage breathing timber settling, the stove clicking faintly as it cooled, the soft hiss of the wind touching the eaves. She turned her head toward the window. The moon had thinned to the faintest curve, a silver eyelash resting against the dark. It no longer spoke, it simply was. And that, she realized, was the final lesson. The moon didn't always need to teach. Sometimes it only needed to be there constant enough to remind her that peace is not a performance, but a presence. She lay still, eyes half open, watching how the silver light lay across the sheets like water. The room glowed in muted tones, gray, blue, and the soft gold of sleep. Outside, the lake was smooth as glass, the willows motionless in reverence. The air smelled faintly of rain and wood smoke. She listened to the whisper of her own breath, even and deep, to the slow rhythm that matched the one she'd heard in the moon's voice. The rhythm of becoming, the rhythm of rest. She thought, I am not waiting anymore, not for morning, not for something to begin or end, just here. A line of words drifted through her mind, not from the moon, not from memory, perhaps from both. Rest is not the end of doing, it is the beginning of being. She smiled, the small smile of someone who has finally come home to herself. A faint rain began to fall. It wasn't the loud kind, no thunder, no insistence. Just a soft drumming on the roof, as if the night itself were humming her to sleep. The drops slid down the window pane in crooked paths, catching the last threads of moonlight. Each drop held a small universe. Each one said, "You are safe." Her eyelids grew heavier. Her breathing slowed further, in and out, in and out. The tide within her, steady and kind. She felt the familiar shape of her blanket, the cool satin edge beneath her fingertips. She felt the mattress cradle her weight, the air around her wrapping close, warm and scented with lavender and rain. Somewhere, far away, an owl called once, twice, and then the forest answered with silence. Time thinned. She floated between thoughts the way a leaf floats between ripples. There was no story left to tell, only the body remembering how to rest. The moon, low on the horizon now, sent one final ray across the floor. It touched the trunk at the foot of the bed, the same one that had glowed that first night, and for a heartbeat the faint pearl of light shimmered again. It lingered there, a promise fulfilled. Then it dimmed, merging with the gray before dawn. The woman whispered, hardly aware of speaking, "Thank you." Her voice was small, but it belonged entirely of her. And in the quiet that followed, she felt something answer, not in sound, but in warmth. A pulse of peace, spreading through her like slow honey. Her body softened completely, her fingers unfurled, her jaw loosened, her shoulders melted into the bed. Each breath became a wave, receding further, slower, until even the waves forgot to return. Outside, the rain deepened, steady and kind. It tapped against the roof, down the gutters, into the thirsty soil. Each drop was a note in the night's lullaby. The world was singing her to sleep. In that song, there were no words, only rhythm. The rhythm of her pulse, the rhythm of rain, the rhythm of rest. It all became one. She dreamed again, but her dreams were simple. A field of soft grasses beneath a wide silver sky. The moon, whole and bright, hanging low enough to touch. She reached for it, and her fingers met light that was neither hot nor cold, just pure. And then she wasn't reaching anymore. She was part of it. Her breath and the moon's breath were the same. Her heart and the tide moved together. No effort, no need. She was the glow. She was the stillness. She was rest itself. In the cottage, the kettle slept, the chair kept watch, and the old floorboards held her dreams as gently as the earth holds rain. The night deepened once more, then thinned toward dawn. The moon sank beyond the hills, whispering one last thought that wasn't really a thought at all. More a blessing carried on air. Sleep well, dear one. You are safe, and the night will hold you. The rain answered with a hush, and the hush became silence, and the silence became sleep.